The envelope was heavier than it should have been. It was just one sheet of paper inside, but in that moment it felt like it carried the weight of everything I'd ever done wrong in my family's eyes. My fingers trembled slightly as I held it, but my voice, oddly enough, remained calm. Across the room, my father sat rigid in his leather armchair, arms folded tightly across his chest, his jaw clenched, eyes unblinking, like he was daring me to open it. I didn't need to. I already knew. This wasn't going to be a Merry Christmas Eve. Well, my sister Sabrina's voice rang out, sugar-coated but sharp enough to cut glass. She sat perched on the armrest of my mother's favorite chair, her wrist glinting with the diamond tennis bracelet they'd gifted her just moments earlier. Her hair was done up in a neat chignon, her lipstick perfectly applied, like she was starring in a holiday commercial, not sitting in the middle of a betrayal. I glanced around the living room. The fire crackled in the hearth. The Christmas tree sparkled in the corner, its ornaments twinkling like they hadn't borne witness to the ugliest family secret I was about to uncover. The lawyer, Mr. Jenkins, sat awkwardly on the edge of the sofa, clearly wishing he'd turned down this particular holiday gig. I broke the seal with deliberate slowness, for pairs of eyes bore into me, my father, my mother Diane, Sabrina, and Mr. Jenkins, who immediately looked away as if already ashamed of what was inside. I read the document silently, eyes scanning the neat, brutal language that erased me from the will like I had never existed. "I don't understand," I said, though the words felt hollow coming out. I did understand. I just couldn't believe they were really doing it. "You're being dramatic, Camille," my mother murmured, swirling her wine in its crystal glass without so much as glancing in my direction. "We've all made difficult choices. This is simply one of them." "My choice," I said slowly, "was to start my own business, to open a bakery. That's what this is about." My father leaned forward. "We invested in your future, Camille. Columbia, MBA. You were supposed to take your place in the family company, not run off to bake cookies." "They're not cookies," I said, voice tight. "It's my dream." "Dreams don't pay bills," he snapped. "Sabrina understands that. She's already made junior partner." Sabrina smirked at me then. It wasn't even a smug smile, it was pitying. "You knew this was coming," she said sweetly. "Don't act so surprised." I folded the paper and placed it carefully back into the envelope. My hands were steady, but inside I felt a kind of hollow cracking I couldn't name. The tree lights flickered against the glossy paper, casting patterns that reminded me of sparklers we used to wave in the backyard as kids, back when family meant something different. I stood slowly, smoothing the front of my navy dress. "Actually," I said quietly, "I expected better from my parents. Silly me." "Camille, please, Mr. Jenkins interjected, clearly uncomfortable. "Perhaps this isn't the right time. There's nothing to discuss," my mother cut in, her voice like ice. "The decision is final." I turned to the coat rack, slipping into my winter jacket. The wool scratched against my neck. Or maybe that was just the lump forming in my throat. My father barked. "Where do you think you're going? We haven't even had dinner." "I've lost my appetite." I reached into my purse, paused, then looked at them, really looked. At the family that had just told me, in writing, that I wasn't worth the ink on the page. "You know what's funny?" I said softly. "You think you're punishing me, but maybe you just punished yourselves." "What's that supposed to mean?" Sabrina's voice shot up an octave, her brows creasing. I didn't answer, just smiled. "Merry Christmas. And good luck. You're going to need it." The heavy oak door shut behind me with a sound that felt like closure. Outside, the snow was falling in thick, quiet flakes, the world muffled in white. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. "Rowan?" "Yeah. It's done. They did exactly what we expected." I walked to my car, the crunch of boots in snow beneath me. "No. I'm okay. Actually, I'm better than okay. A pause. A deep breath. Remember that thing we talked about? I slid into the driver's seat, glanced back at the house once more. I think it's time. 3 months earlier, I stood in front of a weathered Victorian house just off River Street, the kind with creaky floorboards, peeling white paint, and too many memories baked into its walls. The wind carried in the scent of salt from the Savannah River as Rowan let out a low whistle beside me. "They seriously forgot this was in your name?" she asked, pulling the collar of her coat tighter around her neck. I handed her the document I'd printed that morning, title deed, still bearing my full legal name, Camille Elise Hartley. "They signed it over to me when I turned 25, I said, back when they still thought I'd stick around and be the obedient daughter, before I disappointed them." Rowan's eyes scanned the page, then flicked up to meet mine. "Camille, this place is worth a small fortune." I smiled, a quiet, deliberate smile, and ran my hand along the dusty kitchen counter behind us. According to the realtor, enough for a storefront. A full equipment set. First year's rent. And then some. The kitchen light flickered overhead as we stepped further inside. It was cold and empty, except for a few abandoned dishes in the sink and a fridge full of expired condiments. But I could already see it, the future. Not just a bakery. My bakery. Rowan blinked, realization dawning. "You're serious?" "I'm done waiting for their approval," I said. "This house? It's mine. Legally, morally, emotionally. They forgot it even existed. And now, it's going to fund the one thing they never believed in." Rowan reached out, squeezed my hand. "They're going to lose their minds when they find out." "They won't," I said simply, "until it's too late." That night, over takeout and a bottle of cheap wine, we drafted the first plans for the Gilded Crumb. I sent the property listing to a real estate agent Miles had recommended. The next day, I met him at a cafe near Forsyth Park. Miles Donovan looked like someone who never spilled coffee on his spreadsheets. Calm, collected, thoughtful. When he saw my business plan, his brows rose, but not in judgment. "You're really doing this," he said, flipping through the pages. "I thought you were just venting the last time we spoke." I shook my head. "No more venting. This is real. I'm ready, even if it means burning the last bridge with your family." I hesitated, then met his gaze. "They already burned it, Miles. I'm just building something better from the ashes." He nodded. "Then let's talk funding strategy." The following weeks blurred together in a flurry of paperwork, renovation permits, late-night planning sessions, and coffee-fueled breakdowns. The lake house sold faster than expected. Apparently, even a neglected riverfront property in Savannah is gold to the right buyer. Every time I signed a new document, every time I saw the funds transfer into my account, a part of me healed. Not all of me, not yet, but enough to keep going. And when I finally signed the lease on the charming brick storefront 2 blocks from the cathedral, Rowan showed up with a bottle of champagne and paper cups. "To the Gilded Crumb," she toasted, raising her glass in our half-renovated space. "May your revenge be as sweet as your pastries." I laughed, too tired to argue. "It's not revenge." "Honey," she said, leaning back against the exposed brick, "you're literally using the money from their forgotten vacation home to fund your dreams. If that's not poetic justice, I don't know what is." My phone buzzed. A text from Sabrina. "Mom and Dad are worried. Why aren't you answering your phone? Just don't come crying to us when your little hobby fails." I pocketed the phone, unmoved. Let them think it was a hobby. Let them dismiss me one last time. Because by the time they realized what I was building, it would be too late. 3 months in, and the Gilded Crumb no longer felt like a dream. It felt like destiny. The storefront gleamed under the soft golden light of early morning. Fresh flowers in mason jars lined the windowsill, and the aroma of rising dough and warm cinnamon drifted out into the cobbled street, luring in the first wave of customers before we even unlocked the doors. The espresso machine hissed behind me as I dusted powdered sugar over a batch of lavender shortbread. Miles stepped into the kitchen through the back, holding his phone with a wide grin on his face. "Camille," he said, almost breathless, "your red velvet cake just got featured on Food and Wine's Instagram." I blinked. The Food and Wine. He nodded. "Front page. Tagged. Raved about. They called it a nostalgic bite of Southern elegance. You're officially a culinary darling." I let out a soft breath, almost unsure what to feel. Pride? Disbelief? Or maybe something deeper, something that felt suspiciously like vindication. I handed him a piping bag. "Then, let's make sure today's batch lives up to it." The bell above the front door chimed, and a moment later, Rowan's unmistakable voice echoed into the kitchen. "Camille, you have to see this." She waved her phone in the air, cheeks flushed with excitement. The Savannah Gazette just published their Best of Downtown list. Guess who's #1 in the food category? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A name flashed across the screen. Sabrina. I hesitated for just a second, then picked up. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" I asked, carefully wiping flour from my hands. "Is it true?" she asked without preamble. "You're the one who bought the riverfront building." "Doing what?" I asked coolly. "Running a successful business? Making smart investments? Isn't that what you all wanted me to do?" There was a pause on the other end. "Mom wants to know if you'll come to dinner next week." "Sorry, Kay. I'm catering the mayor's daughter's wedding. But hey, feel free to stop by the bakery sometime. We make an incredible humble pie." I ended the call before she could answer. When I turned around, Rowan and Miles were staring at me, identical expressions of disbelief and delight on their faces. "That was cold," Miles said, but he was grinning. "That," Rowan corrected, "was perfect." Still, even in that moment of quiet triumph, I felt nothing. No glee, no bitterness, just a calm resolve, as if every cruel word and every dismissive look from my family had been rebalanced by the clinking of spoons and teacups, the hum of happy customers, the glow of real work paying off. Let them come. Let them see what I've built without them. Let them feel the absence they carved with their own hands. And when they finally do, I'll be right here, apron on, oven warm, success rising like perfectly proof dough. It was a Wednesday afternoon when they walked in. I was just pouring 3 cups of Earl Grey in delicate porcelain teacups, arranging them neatly beside a plate of lemon lavender shortbread, when I saw them through the front window, my mother's perfectly coiffed hair bobbing in the crowd, followed by my father in his tailored wool coat, and Sabrina in head-to-toe beige, looking like she'd just stepped out of a catalog ad for disappointment. Rowan caught my eye behind the espresso bar. "Do you want me to handle it?" I shook my head slowly. "No, this is my table." They slid into the copper-backed chairs at the table near the window, looking out of place among the warm-toned walls, the cheerful clink of forks, the soft Ella Fitzgerald playing overhead. My mother's eyes darted around, taking in the wall of press clippings, the full tables, the chalkboard menu labeled "Today's Featured Tart." "Camille," my father said stiffly as I set down the tea. "This is unexpected." I smiled politely. "Hi, Dad. What can I get you? Our signature dream cake is especially good today." He blinked, confused. "We're not here for cake." "No." I raised an eyebrow. "Then what brings you to my little hobby?" He cleared his throat. "We need to discuss a business proposition." I sat down slowly, folding my hands on the table. "A proposition from Hartley and Company." My mother's voice softened. "Things have changed. The firm is experiencing temporary difficulties." "Temporary?" I echoed, taking a sip of tea. "Funny. I heard you lost 3 major clients in the last month. Must be hard watching the foundation crack." "It's salvageable," my father snapped. but we need to move quickly. We're prepared to offer you a partnership. Full voting rights. Equal share with Sabrina." Sabrina's smile didn't reach her eyes. I took the folder they slid across the table, but didn't open it. "And what makes you think I'd want that?" My mother's voice trembled slightly for the first time. "Because it's what you deserved all along. Name your price." I leaned back in my chair, tilting my head slightly. "You still don't get it, do you?" They said nothing. "This isn't about money. It never was. It's about respect, recognition, everything you refused to give me while I stood in your shadow." "We're giving it now," my father insisted, his voice tight. "No, you're giving me desperation. There's a difference." His fist hit the table, rattling the teacups. "We made a mistake, all right? But we're here now." "And yet," I said softly, "you weren't there 3 months ago, when I sold the lake house. Remember that place? The one you forgot you'd signed over to me years ago." My mother's face drained of color. "That's how I funded this. The down payment, the equipment, the marketing. Every cupcake in this shop has your name on it, in invisible ink." Sabrina's lips parted in disbelief. You sold the house?" I reached into my bag and placed a small box on the table. "No hard feelings," I said with a half smile. "I even made you something." My father didn't move. My mother lifted the lid. Inside were 3 perfectly formed truffles, dark as night, with a dusting of edible gold leaf. On the tag, written in gold cursive, "Humble Beginnings." "Is this a joke?" Sabrina asked. "No," I replied, standing up. "It's a reminder. Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize what you had." They stared at me in silence as I walked back behind the counter, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. It started with a knock on the side entrance. Not the front door, not the way customers or even vendors usually came in. It was the service entrance, where delivery drivers dropped off flour at 5 in the morning, where kitchen staff took their smoke breaks when no one was looking. I opened it and found Sabrina standing there, holding a reusable water bottle and a wrinkled resume. Her makeup was minimal. Her coat, an off-brand knockoff of the designer ones she used to flaunt, hung loose on her narrow shoulders. For the first time in years, she looked like someone real. "I want a job," she said before I could even ask. I blinked. "Excuse me. I want to work here. For you." Her voice was quiet but clear. "Not at the counter. Not managing anything. Just here, starting wherever you'll have me." I crossed my arms, unsure whether to laugh or slam the door. "You've never worked a service job in your life." "I know," she said quickly, "but I'm willing to. I need to understand how you did this, how you knew it would work, how you became someone people actually respect." I studied her face. There was no lipstick, no arrogance, just exhaustion and something else. Something closer to humility. "You start at the bottom," I said flatly. "Washing dishes, stocking dry goods, prepping trays." She nodded without hesitation. "Okay. Minimum wage. No perks." "Okay." I stepped aside and let her in. "Orientation starts at 6 a.m. Wear shoes you don't care about." That first week, she said almost nothing. Just scrubbed pans until her hands cracked and peeled, stacked sacks of sugar, wiped tables long after the customers had left. She didn't flinch when the grease splattered or when the espresso machine screamed at her. On the 3rd day, during lunch rush, I noticed her standing near the prep station, red knuckles clutching the side of the sink. "You okay?" She nodded. "It's fine. I deserve worse." I handed her a small tub of hand cream. "First lesson in service work. If you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of the business." The bell above the door rang. I looked up and saw our mother, Diane Hartley, walk in. She froze. Across the counter, Sabrina, her perfect daughter, was tying on a grease-stained apron and refilling the napkin holders at table 6. Customers bustled around her, smiling, asking for more of the lemon tart. Diane's eyes widened, lips parting slightly. "What are you doing?" "Working," Sabrina answered calmly, not even looking up. "But you're exactly where I'm supposed to be," I cut in from behind the espresso machine. Our mother turned to me, confused, almost afraid to speak. "You came to judge," I said softly, "but you should be watching." Sabrina moved to the next table, picked up empty coffee cups, and disappeared into the kitchen. "She's not here for me," I added. "She's here for herself." Silence. My mother's eyes lingered on the chalkboard above the counter. Today's feature: apple clove crumble. Below it, a small quote I'd written the week before. "Sometimes starting over means starting small." "I see that now," she said, almost inaudibly. I nodded. "Good. Because the next lesson is even harder." "What lesson is that?" I handed her a business card. On it, the name of one of my newest cafes opening across town. "That's the owner's number. He needs a dishwasher." She stared at it. "You want your husband to learn humility." I said gently, "He starts where Sabrina did." "Or not at all." She looked down, hands trembling slightly. "And us," she asked. "Will we ever be okay?" "That depends," I said, walking past her toward the pastry case. "I'm done proving myself. Now it's your turn." 6 months later, I stood in front of my newest acquisition, a restored 3-story Victorian on Main Street, just across from the historic courthouse. The morning sun shimmered off the gold lettering freshly stenciled across the front window, the Gilded Crumb Enterprises. It wasn't just a bakery anymore. It was a brand, a network, an empire. Built from scratch, one scone at a time. Behind me, Sabrina nearly dropped the pastry box she was carrying. "You want me to what?" "I need a manager for the new location," I said, slipping the key into my pocket. "Someone who understands both the front and the back of the house. Someone who knows this business from the floor up." "But I've only been here 6 months. 6 months of showing up early, staying late, learning every position, never once complaining." I pulled a folder from my bag and handed it to her. "What do you say?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "Why are you doing this? After everything?" "Because you did the work," I said simply, "and that matters more than the past." She threw her arms around me, and for the first time since we were kids. I hugged her back. A few hours later, I found my father standing awkwardly in the lobby. He looked out of place in work boots and a flannel shirt, like a man trying on someone else's life. "Nice building," he said, clearing his throat. "Thanks. I got offered a management position at the cafe on Congress Street." I tilted my head, and I turned it down. My eyebrow rose. "I haven't earned it yet," he said, quietly meeting my gaze. "You taught me that, the hard way." I didn't speak, just let the moment breathe. "I was proud of you, you know," he added, his voice cracking. "I should have said it years ago." "I know," I said softly, "but back then I needed to hear it most. Not now." Just then, Sabrina burst in, holding up her phone. "The health department approved the new location. We can start hiring." She paused. "Oh, hi, Dad." He nodded at her. "Your sister offered me a job." "She did." Sabrina looked surprised. "I told him to start at the bottom," I said, "just like you did." Dad looked down, then smiled faintly. "Fair enough." Rowan walked in from the back, coffee in one hand, clipboard in the other. "They're about to announce the Business of the Year award. You ready?" I nodded. "Let's show them what a real empire looks like." That evening, the grand ballroom was filled with city officials, small business owners, press, and a few faces I never expected to see. In the back of the room, my parents sat quietly, no longer in designer clothes, no longer towering figures of power, just people. They'd bought tickets like everyone else. As the mayor stepped up to the podium, Miles leaned over. They put you at the front table for a reason. The spotlight turned. My name echoed through the room. Camille Hartley, founder of the Gilded Crumb, Business of the Year. Applause rose like a wave, but I didn't hear it. My hand slipped into my coat pocket and found the envelope. The same one I'd received on Christmas Eve. I carried it with me, not out of bitterness, but as a reminder. I walked to the podium, cleared my throat, and looked out at the room. Success isn't inherited, I began. It's baked, from scratch, with equal parts defiance and determination. I glanced toward my parents. This, I held up the torn envelope, was my disinheritance letter. I kept it to remind myself what rejection feels like. But tonight, I keep it for a different reason. A pause, a deep breath, to remind myself what redemption looks like. The room erupted in applause again, but this time I felt it. In my bones, in my soul. As I stepped down from the podium, the applause still echoing behind me. Sabrina met me halfway with tear-streaked cheeks and a grin so wide it felt like sunlight. "You killed it," she whispered, pulling me into a hug. "Thanks," I said, voice low, "but we're not done yet." Rowan appeared behind her, practically bouncing. "Speaking of building things, should we tell them?" I nodded, turning to face the crowd again. "We have one more announcement," I said, stepping back toward the microphone. "Next spring, the Gilded Crumb will open not just another location, but a new kind of space." Sabrina stepped forward beside me, more confident now than I had ever seen her. "We're converting one of our downtown buildings into a community hub," she said. "A training center for women re-entering the workforce, small business workshops, mentorship programs. Everything Camille once had to figure out alone. We're going to teach." The mayor beamed. The crowd erupted. But in the back, I saw my mother's face. Still, quiet, eyes glassy with something that wasn't pride exactly. Not yet, but something close. The next morning, she walked into the bakery as the morning rush slowed, her heels quieter than usual, her posture just a little less rigid. She stood at the counter for a long moment, watching Sabrina move gracefully between tables, coffee pot in hand, apron dusted with flour. "She's good at this," my mother said finally. "I know," I replied without looking up from the register. She hesitated. "Would you ever consider hiring me for the training center?" I looked at her, really looked. At the woman who once held a wine glass instead of my hand, who once cut me out of her legacy without blinking. "You want to teach others what I've learned?" I asked, more curious than cold. She nodded slowly. "I want to help people who need a second chance." I thought of the way she looked at Sabrina that night, of the quiet way she folded napkins when no one asked, of how she watched the bakery, not with envy, but with a strange, tentative kind of awe. I reached under the counter and pulled out a clipboard. "Tuesday afternoons. We need someone to teach customer service and basic POS. You start by shadowing Rowan." Her eyes widened slightly. "You're serious?" "As serious as an invoice," I replied. She took the clipboard, hands shaking just a little. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," I said, glancing toward the kitchen where Sabrina was plating tarts. "Thank the work. It's what saved us all." Weeks passed, then months. One evening, after closing, the three of us sat at the big table in the back, the one we once used for staff meetings, but now used for planning bigger dreams. Sabrina scrolled through designs for the training center, while her mother jotted notes for her first workshop. "You know," Mom said, "I used to think success was about control, image, position." I sipped my tea. "And now?" "It's about contribution," she said. "Showing up, doing the hard parts." She looked around the bakery, now dimly lit and warm, with the scent of vanilla and orange zest still lingering. This place, it didn't just rebuild our family. It revealed it, stripped away everything fake and forced, and left just this. I looked around, too, at the glass display case, now empty, at the wall of thank you cards from customers, at the chipped tile by the front door we never bothered to fix because fixing it would mean erasing the story it told. Real is good, I said quietly. Real is enough. The next morning, I opened the bakery like always. Early, quiet before the city woke up. The ovens roared to life. The prep list sat waiting, flour-dusted and full of notes. And across the room, my family stood ready. My sister by the espresso machine, my mother at the front window, wiping the glass clean. We didn't say much. We didn't need to, because revenge. It isn't always about breaking them. Sometimes it's about making them see exactly what they tried to erase. One coffee cup, one dish bin, one honest day's work. At a time. 6 months after that snowy Christmas Eve, I found myself alone in the quiet of my office, long after the bakery had closed. Outside, the streetlights cast golden reflections on the rain-slicked pavement. Inside, the walls were lined with framed newspaper articles, photos from ribbon cuttings, awards I once never dreamed of earning. And right there in the center, mounted behind glass, was the torn envelope, the one that started it all. I stood in front of it for a long time. No anger, no sadness, just stillness. They had written me out of their story that night, but they didn't realize I would become the one holding the pen. I didn't just build a bakery. I built a life, on my terms, without permission, without apology. And somehow, what rose from that rejection wasn't just success. It was peace. Sabrina once asked me if I'd ever forgive them. I told her I already had, not because they earned it, but because I refused to let their choices define me anymore. Forgiveness, I learned, isn't a gift you give to others. It's freedom you grant yourself. The bell above the bakery door rang softly in my mind, a memory now etched in rhythm. The smell of cardamom and brown sugar lingered in the air. And in that moment, with the lights low and the quiet wrapping around me like warm linen, I finally understood. They hadn't disinherited me. They'd set me free. And that was the unexpected gift.